So not too long ago, there was a pretty big incident involving Hoyoverse and the US Federal Trade Commission. Hoyoverse was fined with a whopping $20 million because of some pretty serious allegations around predatory practices. And this sparked a huge discussion in the gacha community about who is really to blame for this. On one side, we have the companies creating these games, often using tactics that can be pretty tempting for kids. On the other side, there are parents who sometimes give their kids access to these games and their credit cards, making it easier for them to spend money. And then of course, there are the kids themselves who are making these purchases. Now, it can definitely be argued that all three of these groups share some responsibility, but here's the thing. When it comes to situations like these, there is often one party that carries the most responsibility. So for the sake of this discussion, we're going to dive deep and figure out who that is. Even if you can argue that it's not entirely fair to place all the blame on one group, let's just roll with the idea that there is one group that stands out the most. So let's get into it and break it all down. And as always, if you enjoy my content, make sure to like, comments, and let me know what you think about who is truly to blame in situations like these. And of course, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Alright, let's get into the video. So when it comes to questions like these, we have to break it down properly. Let's start with the developers, and there are two questions I want to ask here. First, are the developers to blame at all? And second, if they are, how much blame do they actually get? You see, the developers are the ones creating these mechanics, loot boxes, gacha system, all of it. They're the ones designing these systems to be as tempting as possible, especially for kids. So obviously, they're to blame. Like 100%, there's no argument there. But the bigger question is, how much blame do they actually deserve? And here's where things get a bit more nuanced. We know that not all developers are the same. Some make their games more fun, some are generous, and some are straight up exploitative. But at the end of the day, gacha is gacha. No matter how well a developer makes it, at its core, the system is still designed to encourage spending, and that alone makes it predatory. So why do I say there is nuance when blaming developers? Well, before we continue, I want to make something very clear. There's actually no such thing as a gacha game. The term is something the gaming community came up with. In reality, gacha isn't a genre, it is a monetization system. The word gacha comes from Japanese vending machines that give you random toys, and over time, people started associating it with Eastern games that use similar mechanics. But if we strip away that label and actually look at these so-called gacha games for what they really are, we see that they're just RPGs, open world games, or strategy games that happen to use gacha mechanics. And when we do that, something interesting happens. We start seeing the bigger picture. We start noticing just how similar these games are to the ones we put on a pedestal, the same games we celebrate. The truth is, a lot of the mechanics we criticize in gacha games, they exist in Western games too. And if we take it even further, we realize something else. Gacha games aren't even that different from the casual mobile games that we play normally. So what's the big system behind gacha games? What makes them work? Well, there are two major selling points: the characters and the weapons. Characters are the biggest draw. Every gacha game builds hype around its characters, and each of them usually come with a signature weapon that makes them even stronger. That's how developers structure these games. Now here's where the illusion comes in. These games have an in-game currency that you can use to pull for characters and weapons, and technically you can earn this currency by just playing the game. You don't really have to spend money. But let's be real, we all know what's really going on here. Sure, you can grind and save up for characters, but these games take it a step further. They introduce things like 50/50s and stronger versions of characters, whether it's through constellations, limit breaks, or whatever system they use. And at that point, the grind isn't just difficult, it's impossible to keep up without spending money. That's where the predatory nature of gacha really kicks in. The game gives you just enough to feel like you can play for free, but if you want the best experience, if you want to fully unlock a character's potential, the game forces your hand. That's a trap. You see, the key word here is getting the best experience, and this is where the similarity comes in. Whether it's gacha games or any other type of game, the goal is the same. These games give you just enough to have fun, enough to feel like you're making progress. But if you want the best experience, that's a different story. Take Call of Duty for example. Clearly, Call of Duty is not a gacha game, right? Even if we go into the mechanics, you're given all the weapons you need, you can play the story mode, and you are never forced to spend money. But then, they introduce skins. Suddenly, your favorite artist is in the game. Characters from other franchises show up as skins. Your guns can have all kinds of flashy designs. None of these things are necessary, but they enhance the experience. And if you want the best experience, you have to pay. Same with FIFA. If you put FIFA under the so-called gacha category, it fits perfectly. You can play as a free-to-play user, but if you want the real experience, if you want the best players, the best teams, the best shot at winning, you need to spend money. Look at PUBG. You can jump in, play for free, and have fun. But the premium cosmetics, the best skins, the battle passes, if you want the full experience, you're paying up. And this is where lines start to blur. We put games like Genshin Impact or Wuthering Waves in a separate gacha category. But if we look at mainstream games like FIFA or PUBG, at their core, are they not doing the same thing? The only difference is how they monetize. And if we keep going, we start to see this pattern even more clearly in mobile games. Take a game like Candy Crush for example. At first, it's just a casual puzzle game. You can play without spending a single dime. There is no hard paywalls, no loot boxes, no character banners, just simple, straightforward gameplay. But then, we look closer. Candy Crush has its own version of a gacha system, even if it's not labeled that way. Just like in gacha games, you start as a free-to-play player. But if you want the best experience, the easiest way to win, the fastest way to progress, you start buying power-ups, extra lives, and boosters. And what do these boosters do? They make the game easier, just like a 5-star character or a weapon in a gacha game. In fact, many mobile games use the same tricks. The more you spend, the better your rewards. Some give you free stuff at first just to hook you up. Others introduce mechanics where spending gives you just a little more power, just slightly better chance at success. Sounds familiar? At this point, the lines between gacha and non-gacha games have completely blurred. These predatory systems aren't exclusive to Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, or Fate Grand Order. They're everywhere. And here's the wild part. This isn't even new. This kind of monetization has been baked into gaming for years, across every genre, across every platform. It's just insane that we're only starting to have this conversation right now. Alright, so let's circle back to the original question. We've established that gacha developers play a role in this, but how much blame do they really deserve? Yes, we can all agree that there is a level of immorality in these systems. They're designed to manipulate, to push players into spending, and to create artificial scarcity that fuels FOMO. But at the same time, can we really say they're doing anything different from what the gaming industry already accepts? Because when we compare gacha mechanics to other beloved monetization systems, there is almost no difference. The same way FIFA pushes players to buy Ultimate Team Packs, the same way Call of Duty dangles premium skins, the same way Candy Crush sells extra lives, gacha games just take it all a step further. And that raises a tough question. Are these developers really to blame, or are they just playing by the rules of the industry? An industry that, at this point, has made predatory monetization completely normal. And let's take it even further. If you were a game developer, would you really ignore monetization entirely? Would you refuse to include a system that maximizes revenue even when gacha games are completely free to play? Western games often have a base price, but gacha games, they rely entirely on their monetization model. It's a tough pill to swallow, but when you really look at the bigger picture, it puts things into perspective. So how much blame do the developers get? Well, that's for you to decide. But now, let's shift the conversation. Let's talk about parents. Now, with regards to parents, when it comes to the gacha conversation, there are two key questions we need to ask. First, are parents to blame for buying these games for their kids in the first place? Let's be real, these games are designed to be predatory. They're built to encourage spending, they trigger FOMO, and they get players hooked. Any responsible parents would want to keep their kids away from that, at least until they're old enough to understand what they're getting into. So if a parent allows their child to play a gacha game, are they at fault? Should they be held responsible for exposing their kid to a system designed to take advantage of them? And that brings us to the second question. Are parents to blame for giving their kids access to their credit cards? We've seen it happen countless times. A kid spends hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars on loot boxes or gacha pulls, and in most cases, it's the parents' money. So do we blame parents for being careless with their finances, for handing over their cash without setting up spending limits, or for not paying attention to where their money is going? Well, that's what we're going to break down in this section, because while gacha games might be exploitative, at some point we need to ask the question, where does parental responsibility come in? Alright, so should parents be blamed for their kids owning or playing a gacha game? Absolutely not. If a parent already knows what a gacha game is and still lets their kid play it, they're obviously an irresponsible parent and are not even part of this discussion. The real discussion comes in when parents don't know what gacha games are, and this is where the companies come back into play. As we all know, gacha games are free to play. That means any kid with a phone, a tablet, or a gaming system can download and play them without their parents even knowing. And let's be real, kids have access to these devices more than ever. Whether or not kids should have smartphones is a whole nother conversation, but the point is they do, and that makes gacha games incredibly accessible. Even if a parent knowingly gets their child a gacha game, I still wouldn't blame them. Why? Because look at how gacha games are advertised. If you've ever seen a gacha game ad, you'll notice one thing missing: the gacha system itself. You'll see flashy combat, stunning worlds, cool mechanics, and amazing characters, but what you won't see is how those characters are obtained. The gacha system is never front and center in marketing. Even in app store descriptions, it's usually just one small line buried in fine print. So if a parent who doesn't know what gacha is buys or allows their kids to play one, their only source of information is the game's marketing. And since the marketing doesn't properly explain gacha mechanics, how can we say it's the parents' fault? This still falls on the companies themselves. Whether you want to blame the gaming industry as a whole or just gacha companies specifically, well, that's up to you. But one thing's for sure, parents aren't the ones at fault here. Now, when it comes to kids having access to their parents' credit cards, this is 1000% on the parents. No discussion, no debate, no nuance, it's just irresponsible parenting. I have just one question for parents in this situation. Why does your kid have access to your credit cards? Because it's either you willingly gave them or they took it without you knowing. And in both cases, there is no excuse. Let's be real, there is no way you wouldn't notice something weird happening with your money. No way. If your kid is repeatedly making transactions on a gacha game, you are going to see money leaving your account. Why aren't you checking? Why aren't you asking questions? Why aren't you investigating? Why are you not getting to the bottom of it? If you see unauthorized transactions and do nothing about it, that's not just bad parenting, that's just irresponsibility, period. And honestly, I've really tried to think of a reason why a kid should have access to their parents' credit card without strict monitoring. If someone in the comments has a good reason, please let me know, because I genuinely cannot think of one. If for some reason a child must have access to a parent's credit card, then at the very least it should be heavily monitored. You cannot just hand over your credit card and let a kid do whatever they want. That is insane. At the end of the day, if your child is continually spending your money on gacha games, that is 100% on you as a parent. There is no way to slice it differently. Whether you gave them the card or if they took it without your knowledge, if you let it happen without taking actions, that's just pure irresponsibility. Now, let's talk about the kids, the main demographic, the target audience, the ones actually spending in gacha games. Are they to blame for spending? Are they to blame for having access to these games? Are they even to blame for playing these games at all? Honestly, no. In fact, if we're trying to figure out who holds the most blame in this entire conversation, I'd argue that kids are the least responsible party. And here's why. Kids do not know better. That's just how kids are. They do things that feel good in the moment. They chase what's fun. They don't think about long-term consequences. And this doesn't just apply to little kids. It applies to teenagers too. Everyone watching this video knows exactly what I'm talking about. We've all done stupid things as kids. Things that at the time made perfect sense to us. And when you throw gacha game advertising into the mix, things start making even more sense. These games are designed to be fun and designed to make you want to spend. Your favorite content creators, they're pulling for characters having the time of their lives, getting hyped, making it look exciting. You see them winning and you want that feeling too. It's not just kids. Every player, regardless of age, feels this pull. If a kid wants to spend money on a game like this, is that really their fault? No, that's literally the entire purpose of how these games are structured. And let's be clear. Playing gacha games isn't inherently bad. It's not immoral, it's not illegal, it's not some corrupt practice. These games aren't just gambling simulators. They have stories, mechanics, and genuinely fun gameplay. The gacha system is just a monetization model laid on top. So when people try to argue that kids deserve blame for wanting to spend money on these games, I just don't agree. They're just playing the game as it was designed to be played. At this point, we haven't finished breaking down who holds the most blame in all this, but if you ask me, the kids hold the least. So the big question is, who holds the most blame in all of this? Well, I'll leave that one open-ended. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know who you think is most responsible. Do you agree with me that kids hold the least blame, or do you think I got something wrong? Maybe you believe the real issue lies with the gacha developers or the parents. Who do you think deserves the most blame and why? Even if you think the kids actually are the most responsible, tell me why you think so and let's have that discussion. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.